Okay, looks like we are at the top of the hour, so I'll go ahead and get started with our intro bit. My name is Marta Soto. I work for the American Psychological Association. I do training as well as email support cases, and my colleague Patty is here just to help monitor the Q&A box and assist. Hopefully there won't be any AV issues, but of course we never know with Zoom. So today we're going to talk about APA PsycTests. In particular, today's training, we are focusing on the EBSCO and the ProQuest platform versions. If anybody is here who uses PsycNet or Ovid, you can still follow along. The fields we're looking at and the content is all going to be the same. It just might be laid out or designed a little bit differently. And just so you know up front, since you're here today, you will be automatically receiving over email a recording of today's training, and you'll be getting a copy of the slides as well. So some brief housekeeping for Zoom. We're in webinar mode, and since we're in webinar mode, you might not be able to use the chat feature to chat at us. We recommend you use the Q&A box, just so we can keep things a little more organized as we're going through. Please feel free to use that throughout. We will have time for questions at the end, but I also think that asking questions when we're in the middle of a demo is a lot easier for everybody than trying to backtrack, 20 or 30 minutes later. So we have the Q&A. If you really want to ask the question, with your voice, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you. There's only a couple of you here, so we should be able to accommodate that, no problem. And the overview of what we'll talk about today. So we have literally just 2 slides talking about PsycTests, what it is, what's in it. We'll spend most of our time doing those example search demos. Again, an EBSCO example and a ProQuest example. For EBSCO, we are going to use the newer version of their platform that they've been slowly rolling out. So if you're using newer EBSCO, this might be one of your first trainings on that from APA. And if you don't have the new layout for EBSCO yet, and this is going to be a little sneak preview of what they have coming to your campus soon. Okay, so we'll start off and say, what is APA PsycTests? This database is very different than the ones you may be more familiar with. APA PsycInfo, PsycArticles, and PsycBooks are collecting basically just scholarly publications, often journal articles, book chapters, sometimes dissertations. PsycTests has a very different focus. Each of these records is describing not a publication, but a test or a measure that was used in the research. This is not really like a commercial package of the most famous tests that you can purchase for a fee. Of these 78,000 tests we have, most of them were developed in the context of research. They were created and used and published often in a journal article, though again, sometimes in a book or a dissertation or a government report. And it can be very hard to find those types of tests. They can be a little bit buried in the research literature. So this database is designed to sort of pull out the focus on the test themselves, make them easy to discover using these test-specific search terms. And then again, any field you can search, you'll also see in the record. So giving a lot of descriptive information about that test at a glance. So this kind of grew out of our millions of records in PsycInfo, but with the particular focus on the tests themselves. We mentioned some user scenarios on the slide. That's what we're going to be sort of demoing in just a moment. And some basic stats. I mentioned the 78,000 test records. This database is about half full text. About half of the records will include the PDF of the test itself. In other cases, it will be a description and then, a little bit of contact info to try to track down the test itself. So in that way, it's a little bit like PsycInfo. It's a good start to your bibliography, and we provide the full text whenever we are legally allowed to. And this is the full list of the fields you're going to find in APA PsycTests. Over half are bolded on this slide, and the bold fields are unique to searching for test. So you might notice a few of these. We have test methodology and we have instrument type. Those are filters. They'll look like the drop-down menus on the search page. There's like a set list of values. They're indexed by our APA staff for very precise and efficient searching. You just have to pick the values you want and then go ahead. We have other fields, though, that are more free text captured as the author describes their test. And that's going to be fields like the factors and subscales, reliability, validity, and factor analysis. So similar, we have that combination of the sort of controlled list, like filters you can add, as well as the free text fields to search the author's own words. So you'll see a few of the unbolded fields are shared with PsycInfo, things like author or publisher or, keywords. But this really is kind of its own database that needs its own search strategies, and that's why we are here today. I see one more person's joined us. We just got through a couple info slides about PsycTests. I'm about to go into the search demo, though I will pause if there are any questions about sort of what is this database and what it contains. Looks like no, so we're going right in. And we're going to do our first search today on the EBSCO platform. Looks like you're seeing that now in my screen share. This is the newer being rolled out EBSCO website where your school might get your databases through EBSCO. So again, a reminder, whenever you're starting psych test research, you're going to want to search this database on its own, even on its own compared to the other APA databases, because PsycTest does have all those unique fields. So for our first example, we'll say that we are an instructor and we're teaching a course that's maybe research methods or maybe focused on statistics of psychology. And we want to find some examples of how those statistics are applied to like existing real life tests. So the first couple tricks I'm going to show here are relevant for all of our PsycTest user. If you're trying to get a test that you want to use, for class or a research paper or an instruction example, you want the test, tomorrow, this week, what you're going to want to do is limit your results to this full text checkbox. So that's going to show just the half of the results that have that test PDF included. Another important limit to set up front, we're scrolling all the way down until we find permissions. And we're going to select may use for research teaching. So these two limiters up front are saying, give us just the results with the full text PDF of the test items, and also just show us the records that have this easy permission statement. I don't need to get permission to use this test for, appropriate teaching and research uses. We're going to talk a little more about permissions after this search demo, but for now, if you want to use something immediately, add this search filter, because then you can just use what you find without having to request and secure particular permissions. So now that this basics is set up, full text plus permissions, we can start adding things to make our actual content search. So one place we're going to go is the methodology limit. Because this is PsycTest, the methodology you'll see here is actually types of statistical tests that were applied. So the methodologies are going to be types of validity, types of reliability, and then types of factor analysis. So I'm going to choose a few for my faculty example. It's nice on the new EBSCO design. Everything you select just kind of pops up above the drop-down menu. You don't have to kind of scroll through to see what you've selected or, oh, maybe I misclicked something. It's just keeping track for you. And of course, for all these filters, the more you select, the broader your search results are going to be. So it's not saying, show me a test that uses both of these. It's saying, show me a test that uses either or. And again, this methodology is for test searching. If you're in PsycInfo, there's a methodology field that is different, right? PsycInfo methodology is going to say things like case study, literature review, empirical study, and test methodology is going to have, again, these statistics options. So another important reason to search PsycTest on its own, even the methodology field is going to be different than what you find in a PsycInfo search. Okay, so we've got our full text, we've got our easy permissions, we've got methodology, the statistics types we want, and then our final step for setting up this search is going to be to search for our concept. What is the test measuring? Keywords and subjects are going to be available the same as in PsycInfo, but test also has its own searchable field called construct. And this is the one that I often like to use. Every test record has one construct, and it's basically just, what is this test measuring in a word or a very short phrase? So for the test construct, I'm going to type in self-concept, and then we'll go ahead and run the search. We've got a couple results. I'm going to show the filters on this page. EBSCO has moved them to a different place. You see a lot of the navigation has moved over to the left side, including the new searches and the recent searches. They're over on the left now instead of the top. And the filters now are kind of hidden, and they're going to appear on the right-hand side, right? So the fields are the same, and the values are the same, but just the layout of this EBSCO results page looks a little different now. Some of the filters you can use over here. I'm just looking for an example. We're not going to add anything because in this case, we just have 8 results. Before I open up my example record, are there any questions about how we got here? How the advanced search page looks for PsycTests on EBSCO and the fields we used for the search. Again, you can see the search term up here, and then if you select filters, it's going to show you at the top everything that we selected. So kind of a reminder of how we got here, with the option to remove any of these if we wanted. Okay, so we're going to open up this record that's called What Kind of Person Am I? The PDF is right here as expected. So every PsycTest PDF is going to have this cover sheet, some basic information, a longer version of the permission statement, and then after this cover page is where you will see the test records themselves. So the questions, and in this case, a little scoring guide. So beyond the PDF, what else can this PsycTests record tell us? So up near the top, we got here by searching the construct, which I said, what is this test about in a word, self-concept? Purpose is going to tell us what is this test about in a sentence, and then description is in a paragraph. The description is the closest thing to an abstract that you'll find in PsycTests. Scrolling down a bit more, and we have all this author contact information. We're going to talk about that a little bit more with permissions, but we provide the ORCIDs and the emails for any author as available. And then we sort of restate the first author, also known as the correspondence author, in its own little field. So if you have questions about the test content or application of the test that this record doesn't answer, this is how you can contact the person who designed and used that test in the first place. Okay, we've got construct here, what we searched for. Here's the permission statement. So that is always restated in the test. And again, this means we can use that PDF as soon as we want in an academic setting. And going on a bit more, this is the statistics data that our faculty was particularly interested in, right? So what we did was we selected a couple of these methodology types from that drop-down filter, but now that we're in the record, we're getting much more specific information about reliability and validity. Like which test was run and the actual numbers for it. You'll often find the test location mentioned in the PsycTests record. In this case, we have the test as a PDF already, but basically if we went back to the article that had this test published, it says, oh, if you go find the article, the test will be found in the supplemental material. So just giving a little more information where exactly you can find this test in the published literature. Another example of pairing the drop-down filters with the more detailed free text in the record, you can limit on age group or population group, but for a test, we have much more specific population details that are provided by the author. So you can say which sample or which group of subjects this test was actually administered to. And then the final field I want to talk about is source citation. So every test has a very close relationship with the publication where it was developed, right? Test development, it says here. And we have this journal article, full citation, and the year it was published and everything like that. So we have the test PDF, we have this descriptive record. But if we want to learn more about how this test was used in context, we can follow this DOI and go into the PsycInfo record. So before I do this click, does that make sense to everyone? This is the PsycTests record, and every PsycTest record is linked back to where the test was published in the first place. Okay, so we'll remember the name of our correspondence author up here, Hannu Rati. That's in Finnish. I am not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. But here we go. So now this is the PsycInfo record. And again, Hannu Rati, right? So the test creator and the first author of the journal article, it's the same person. So now we've got the journal information. We see it's open access, so we can get that full text of the journal very easily. And go visit the publisher page here. So now we have that PDF of the journal article, which is open access, and we also see that the publisher was Springer. So did that navigation make sense to everybody? We did a PsycTests search, we saw the test record, the test PDF, and we're also able to very quickly link into the PsycInfo record and the journal PDF, right? Get a little more research context of how this exact test was developed. That source citation also tells you who is the publisher, as we found. It was Springer. So the publisher is the one who holds the copyright, and they set sort of the legal terms of use of the test that they own. So if there's no questions, we're going to go back to the slides and talk about permissions a little bit, but keep in mind that the source citation will take you to the publisher, and then the author contact that we saw up at the top will take you to the author. Okay, so we're going back to the slides for a moment. So we saw our first example of how you can search for a test, navigate through the test record to learn more, and link back to the related publication where the test was developed. Permissions are kind of a big deal for PsycTest. Different publishers have sort of different policies about what you can legally do with the test. So I want to make sure we understand this field, and then we're going to go back into our next demo. So as we saw, permissions, it's available as a search limiter or a filter with that drop-down box. You can see the permission statement again in the test record, and then the PDF test file has an even fuller version of the statement. So as I had said earlier, may use for research teaching is the easiest to use permission statement. And good news, that is the most common permission statement we have in PsycTest. Contact author is the next most common, coming in at about 40%. And then contact publisher or contact both author and publisher each come in at about 8%. So you may see those as well. Not specified is a pretty rare permission type. It mostly applies to some of the older articles that were sourced, things that existed before the internet. In some cases, tests that were created before, the oldest ones from the late 1800s, the turn of that century, before sort of publishing industry standards and licensing were like standardized or created. So we'll just talk about the main types for now. So may use for research teaching, this is your green light, go ahead permissions statement. So if your use matches the permissions that are granted and you have this permission statement, you can just go ahead and you don't have to check with anybody about anything. Basically, the way you can use a test PDF that has this permission statement is very similar to the way that you would use a journal article, which I'm sure you're all familiar with at this point if you're researching on the level of like tests and measures. So, don't plagiarize it, don't post it on the internet, don't charge people a fee to take the test from you. But if you want to use it as an example for instruction, for a school project, you can use it as a clinician, again, as long as you're not charging a fee for the test. You can even administer the test and publish your own results based on what you found using the test, as long as you credit the authors. On the other hand, these are some examples of never permitted usage. So it doesn't matter what the statement says or who you ask, you won't be able to do this, right? So again, hopefully pretty common sense. If you're used to using other people's journal articles, don't post it on the open internet, don't plagiarize, don't use the test for commercial gain. We also have what I'm calling some yellow light permissions cases. Things that are not outright banned, but they're not outright granted either. So if you have a situation where you want to publish not only results of the test, but the test items itself, you will have to ask the publisher for permission to do that. Like, let's say the test was so integral to your research, and now you have a dissertation, or you have, a journal article or a book chapter that you're trying to publish, and you want to include the test items because the test was very essential to your research. You're going to need to ask the publisher permission to republish their own test. If it's a classroom assignment and you're just going to do like turnitin.com or Blackboard or Canvas course page, including the test as an appendix should be no problem, because that's, secure internal like campus network usage. But if you're going to actually publish something that's going to be open to the general public, that's when you would need to ask the permissions, right? Also, if the permissions statement says contact publisher, then you'll need to contact the publisher even for the green light use cases. So I hope that makes some sense, right? Green light means you have the permission statement and the use lined up. But if one piece of that is missing, if the use case is ambiguous, again, such as republishing the test, or if the permission statement says you must contact first, then you have to do that, right? So for contact the publisher, you can find them using the source document DOI that was provided in the PsycTests page. So again, the publisher is technically the one who owns the test, who licenses the test, who's going to give permission to use it if there's any ambiguity, or again, if it says you have to contact the publisher. Pausing here in case there are any questions. Okay. So then finally, we're going to talk about contact author, right? So if the permission statement says you have to contact the author, then you have to do that, even for the green light use examples. Even if the permissions do not require you to contact the author, you might want to. So the publisher is going to be sort of the expert on copyright and licensing, but the author is going to be the expert on the test itself. They created it, they used it. So if there's anything you're missing from the psych test record, maybe the PDF is not there, maybe you have more instructions about scoring or administration or something else. If you want to ask the test creator, you can find them again in the psych test record. We have their email at the time this was published. We also provide the ORCID IDs in case somebody has changed emails or changed institutions. You can go there and try to find the most recent way to contact them. Okay, so yeah, permissions are an extra wrinkle in using tests compared to the journal articles type databases. I hope this is not too off-putting or confusing. I know that, again, since Patty and I do both training and support, we get a lot of questions about psych test permissions. So I wanted to provide some of this information up front. Actually, Patty, now might be a good time for you to drop the downloadable version of the slides into the chat. Everybody can have sort of a copy of this to take with them. I also want to let you all know that everything APA knows about the test and has permission to share is already in the psych tests database. If you reach out and contact us because you're a little bit confused, is this a green light permissions case? Is it yellow light? I don't know exactly how to figure out who the publisher is. We are always happy to help you navigate the record and try to get one step closer to finding the information that you're looking for. But APA itself probably does not have that information. Sometimes we hear from people and they seem to believe that we have just like a whole secret stash of PDFs and scoring guides and things like that. But the fact is that we don't, and anything we have is already in the test record. So if you're looking for something, you can follow sort of the tips from these slides, and of course, reach out. We'll try our best to help you figure out how to contact authors and publishers. But we ourselves are not the publisher of most of psych tests. We're sort of sharing tests that are mostly from other publishers, sharing as much as we are legally allowed to. That's kind of how this database is working, trying to make this content discoverable for you while also trying to respect, the work and ownership of other people who are not affiliated with APA directly. Okay. Final check for permissions related questions, and then we'll go ahead back to our second search demo, which is going to be on ProQuest. Okay, so what we're going to do on ProQuest is a little bit of reverse. On EBSCO, we started in psych tests and linked into PsycInfo. What we're going to do on ProQuest is start in PsycInfo and then link into psych tests. So if your institution has both of these databases, just to sort of show how you can kind of move back and forth between the two when doing your research. So again, starting with PsycInfo for now. PsycInfo has exactly one field that deals with tests and measures, and it is called test and measures. So you can search for a test and measure basically by name or by title in PsycInfo. And then once you find the name of a test that you like in the context of research that you're interested in, then you can open up the psych tests record to learn a lot more. So for this case, I'll say I'm looking for tests that are about resilience or resilient. Again, this is the PsycInfo test and measure field. And I'll scroll down to a classification code lookup. This is a PsycInfo field. I love classification codes. ProQuest makes them, oh, I think it was just logging me out. Okay, there we go. I've had this browser tab open for a minute and it's like, I'm not sure. It looks like I was logged in. Oh, there we go. Okay, so on ProQuest, again, this is PsycInfo, they make it a little easier to look up. We've got over 100 classification codes here, and these are sort of like topics or subfields within psychology. So I'm going to look up personality. This is the angle of psychology I'm interested in for this research. Let's say I'm a student and I'm interested in personality psychology, right? So I can open this up as a classification code, say personality traits and processes. So this is sort of the context of PsycInfo articles I'm looking for. And then I'm adding this one test and measures field and say, I want tests that measure resilience in the research context of a personality trait. So we'll go ahead and run this search. Quite a bit of results. This might be a nice case to add a filter, such as age group. Again, ProQuest has this very nicely designed. You can choose what you want to see or what you don't want to see. We have adulthood as an age group, but we also have much more specific breakdowns of adulthood. So I'm going to select aged to bring these search results down a little bit. And I'm also going to go ahead and zoom up to the most recent publication years. Okay, I'm looking for a particular record. So this might require me to go on to page 2. Oh, right, I need to sort by most recent. So there we go, changing the sort order as well. And here's the one I wanted to show you, less is more, okay? So we've found a journal article that has a personality psychology perspective, and it has a test and measure with the word resilient or resilience in the title. So here I am in PsycInfo. I picked this PsycInfo record in particular because it has so many different tests and measures, right? And as you may know, the PsycInfo record is already pretty detailed, pretty busy. And in a case like this, especially where there are so many tests and measures, you can see how it would be a little bit impractical to try to stuff all those test-specific fields into this one test and measure place. So this is why we list the test names, we link out, and then you can just go into the record of any test you might be interested in. So in this long list, what I'm looking for is the tests that do in fact say resilience or resilient in the title, which is many, but not all of them. And we also want a test that has a DOI. The DOI means there will be a psych test record for that test. So this next step about ProQuest is a little bit confusing. The test DOI is going to actually take me to the PsycNet page, which is nice, but if your school has ProQuest only, this is not going to tell you very much. You're going to get a much more abbreviated version. So at this point, if your school has PsycTest on ProQuest, the easiest thing to do is going to be just a good old copy paste. I'm opening a new tab of ProQuests, and I'm going to say PsycTest. So I'm just copying over the title of what we saw, Resilience Research Center. And we'll look at a few fields here just to see kind of what else might you find in a PsycTest record. So first of all, in ProQuest, the description is in fact called the abstract, right? So that's the descriptive paragraph here. It might be called description or abstract based on which platform you're on, but it's the same idea. And if we skim this, we see that this was a rewording of the child and youth resilience measure. So basically, they took an existing test and they updated it for an adult population. So that's what we're learning from this summary of the test. Scrolling down a bit to format, this is where we see the very specific scoring information, 5-point Likert scale, and then minimum and maximum scores. Permission statement here says contact corresponding author, and now we know how to do that and what all that means. This is also a test that has other versions. So we can see this test type is a revision, and the original one that's linked here is child and youth resilience. So we kind of learned that from the abstract at the top, but it's restated here. So you can use the psych test record to find even other versions of the same test, which might be useful in some cases. Another option is if you're searching by a test name in psych tests, you can put in the acronym. Right. So that's just another way we try to make this a little easier for you. Acronym, other versions, author contact info, as we've discussed, and then going down to population details. So the description mentioned this was updated for adults, but then the population details give a much more specific idea of who exactly this measure was given to. And again, this is how the source citation looks. We have the link to the PsycInfo record that developed this test, and ProQuest even makes it a step easier. That the DOI for this article on social indicators research is right here. Oh, it's a Springer again. There we go. So again, that click to sort of get into the journal article and the publisher information. The final test record we're going to look at, going back to this PsycInfo record page with all those many examples, is going to be the Connor-Davidson Resilience Scale. So we can copy paste this title into PsycTests again. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, you might be asking, like, what's the point of acronym? Like, if you know the acronym of a test, can't you just find out what the test name is? In this particular example, they're using like UK spelling. So if you keep searching this long thing, but you spelled center the American way, it might be easier to search the acronym if a title is very long or has unusual spelling in it. I say unusual from the American perspective, since that's where I am based with APA right outside DC. Okay. So back to psych tests. Final test example today, this Connor-Davidson Resilience Scale. So a little surprised, psych test is actually giving me 32 results for this. Often for journal articles, I'll want to see the most recent first, but for a test, I'm actually going to start with the oldest first, once that refreshes, because the oldest is going to be the original. And this test has apparently been adapted and used many times. So this is kind of an exciting discovery of all the tests that were in that PsycInfo. This one seems to be sort of a heavy hitter in the literature. So again, the abstract on the top. In this case, the abstract is actually including some of the scoring information. And it tells us up here, the scale was administered to different groups of subjects. So there's a community sample, and then people with particular psychological disorders they were all given this scale. So they tested it kind of broadly in that sense. And they mentioned some of the statistics up here as well. Really nice to have this summary. I know sometimes when I'm doing research, it's a little easier to skim. So most of the things that you'll find in this abstract will be restated in specific fields below. Another example, if we were searching in psych tests, we would probably want to use the construct resilience. You see in the thesaurus subjects and in the keywords that resilience is mentioned, but the subject and keywords really talk a lot about like, oh, this is a test. they sure developed this test. They sure measured the statistics of this test. And then the construct is just really like, yeah, we know it's a test. Here is really directly what this test is about. The purpose here mentions the factors and subscales. Factors and subscales is a new-ish field. I want to say it was added in 2019. So the newer publications are going to mention factors and subscales in that field. But for anything published in older times like 2003, you might see those factors and subscales broken out in a different field, like in the description, and in this case, we're seeing it in the purpose. Again, listing out those factors and subscales makes the test a little more discoverable. Like if you've searched by construct or by title and you're having trouble finding the kind of test you want, you can also start searching like as a more all text or all fields search. And that will pick up measurable traits that are considered factors or subscales, right? So maybe there aren't a lot of tests about positive acceptance of change directly, but if you search it, then you might find it as a factor or a subscale. So again, that's part of why we include all this free text info from the author. Sometimes you get too many results, sometimes you get not quite enough, but this is a way you can sort of open up your search if you need to find more results. A number of other versions of this test. You see here, this is in fact the original. We found the oldest one, but you can see it's been revised and translated a number of times. People seem to find this test important to use. Down in population details, you'll see the different samples are mentioned again. And the last thing I wanted to show you with this PsycTests example is this has been big enough, splashing enough in research that we actually see multiple source citations here. You'll always see the development source, and we can see here, okay, this is the same Connor Davidson, 2003, development of a new scale, right? So this is pretty clearly the original article. We can tell from the similarities and the fact that it's labeled development, right? So this is going to be the copyright holder, the publisher to contact for using the original version of this scale. But again, to add a little bit to discoverability, we see 3 other source citations here. So not every article that uses a test is going to be added to the PsycTest record, just the ones that are particularly notable. So this test, we can see from the title, it used this Connor Davidson scale to basically test the effects of a particular medication used for people with PTSD. This one applied the test to professional athletes, and then this one did additional statistics on the test. So those were important enough that they've been included here. So again, this is kind of how you can use PsycInfo, PsycTests together for discoverability, right? We searched PsycInfo on test name. We found that article that had multiple tests to explore. We found this particular test, which is leading us on to not just 1, but 4 additional PsycInfo, and in this case, PsycExtra. This was probably a conference presentation, I'm guessing. But anyway, yeah, you can use info and tests back and forth to sort of discover more and more avenues for research and more things to add to your bibliography. Final little stinger tip for ProQuest version of PsycTests. Construct is not a controlled list the way that the thesaurus terms are. But it does allow you to browse here, which is kind of nice. This is like a ProQuest specific tip and PsycNet. EBSCO and Ovid don't do this in quite the same way. What I'm able to do here is I want to look for tests about money. Here we go. Let me try this again. So I'm going to just type money here in test construct. run that search. And now I have the results of sort of any version of construct that mentioned money. I can open up this filter on ProQuest to include and exclude the test constructs I like. So I'll say, let's exclude money donations, but I like the rest of these. So here we go, apply. And now what we're seeing is a list of sort of different types of constructs that involve money. And again, if you open up this, you'll see which constructs have the highest counts. So just a little extra tip for navigating test construct. This is going to work on ProQuest and on PsycNet, though EBSCO and Ovid do not feature the same equivalent. I mean, they have the same number of constructs and the same like results per construct. They just don't have quite the same filter option for teasing out the phrasing of constructs. What's new at APA? We had a thesaurus update this summer. This is going to apply to all databases. You can search the thesaurus for PsycTests and, of course, for PsycInfo. We have another thesaurus update that's coming up in November. So in a couple weeks, we'll get another, I think it's 70-something new terms on top of this June update. The latest from APA Books, new releases that are being added to the Psych Books database. We've also got the 2025 publication year books e-collection starting, and some of our most recent and soon to be coming APA handbooks. The handbooks are special because you can purchase them as individual titles. That's not the case for most of APA's published books, but the handbooks are available for individual, like one-time purchase as print and also e-version. We're getting a new APA journal in the spring of next year. Psychotherapy database of videos has had new videos added twice this year, as is typical. PsycInfo research services, very hard to summarize. Have this on your radar. We include some links in the notes of the slides, so if you want to take that with you. But basically, if your campus has APA PsycInfo, you already have access to this sort of AI research assistant and a bunch of sort of visual discovery tools. So if you have PsycInfo, go ahead and start playing around with that. Dropping the link for that in the chat. Okay, back to PsycTests and resources to take with you. If you're a librarian who's interested in trialing, we have the link for that. This is sort of a wrap on our webinars for the fall semester, though we will be doing more again in the spring. So this is the website you can kind of bookmark to see what we'll have available come January and February. When I say spring, I mean spring semester, like it will be winter. Also on this page, you'll be able to find saved video recordings of this and other past webinars. So even if we're in between live sessions, you can find recordings of something that you attended or missed attending. We have a wealth of training resources spread throughout apa.org, our blog, and our YouTube channel. A lot of our trainings resources are about PsycInfo. So here I've pulled out specific links to take you directly to the PsycTests training content. APA as a nonprofit publisher, our organization overall has a broader mission about psychological well-being. Of course, academic research is a big part of that in our publishing directorate, but I do also want to highlight the work of our other colleagues at APA for compiling some particular crisis lines, as well as topics. The things that are highlighted on this slide are sort of more dire situations, though if you go onto the apa.org topics page, you'll find other topics related to human behavior, which of course encompasses a lot of things. We have AI, we have the importance of sleep, we have friendship, we have gun violence, Again, just if you are a student, perhaps bookmark some of this in case you ever need to assist a friend who's struggling. If you're faculty or librarian, perhaps consider linking to some of these on a course page or a LibGuide, whatever you have access to, since you are going to be recognized as on campus as a person who has psychological resources. Perhaps consider offering some of these sort of 24/7 real life resources in addition to the good academic work that you are doing on your campuses. On a lighter note, something for librarians to promote right here, um, you know, tell your campus that you have the APA databases and that your library is the one who purchased them for everyone to use. And here we are at the end. Again, we're a small team here. Patty and myself are two of the 5 people who monitor this Learning Commons page. It's a combination of frequently asked questions with answers, as well as a form where you can submit more questions to us. We do check this throughout the day. It is not a black box, we promise. If you have any follow-up questions about psych tests or anything else that came up today, you can even address it to me. Again, my name is Marta Soto. I'm with the American Psychological Association.